Okay, so here I am. You've gone from a fairly charismatic thought leader in AI to a fairly awkward technical person in AI, so there you go, enjoy. So a little bit of background about me, to be honest. So 4 years at coeo UK, 15 years in technology, obviously not all in AI, but a lot in customer experience and customer journey optimization. I've got a specialism in emerging technologies and digital transformation, so that's really assessing a business and understanding what direction it needs to go in and what tools we need to use to get to that stage. And I'm currently focused on AI transformation at coeo UK. So a little bit of background. There we go. So what's the agenda for this talk, really? And I think it's to build upon what Toju's presentation showed. There was no collusion there. It's fortunate that my slides directly align with what she was saying, so we're getting something right there. So I want to provide an overview of the current state of AI in collections. I want to set the expectations for what our involvement is in AI development in collections. I want to define a responsible approach to AI development that we are currently using. And I want to present 3 tools that we've built based on that foundation to show how we're using customer-centric AI in the collections industry. So we'll have a quick look at the state of AI tools in collections. You're probably aware of the generalist tools that Toju mentioned, so Copilot generally. Productivity-wise, very good, but in terms of integrating into specialist processes to get the best out of customer journeys, not great. They're fairly closed-in tools that you can't really change. There's limited integration potential or customizability there, and they've got limited impact of them being a productivity tool, basically. And then you move into specialist tools. So specialist tools are tools that are designed specifically for optimizing the process of collections utilizing AI. To be able to get to that point, you need tech teams to integrate, or you need to build your own. It's expensive. You need AI engineers, data engineers, and all the other sort of things that come around with building those sort of models and processes. And it's hard to get right, as Toju sort of touched upon previously. There's a lot of ethical issues around developing AI, and if you don't understand it, you can fall into those pitfalls relatively quickly. I think the third state of tools within the collections industry is partnering with a specialist provider, so kind of what Toju touched upon at the very end of the presentation. There's only a handful of these market leaders in the industry that are utilizing AI as part of optimizing collections. And they are really specialists in collections, optimizing, utilizing AI. Fortunately, we're one of them, which is why I can stand in front of you today and have this conversation with you, really. And the way you would utilize those is outsource your infrastructure or processes to the third party, which would be a DCA that's utilizing AI in collections, basically. The benefit of that is it's a low comparative cost, and it often aligns with a commission-based model. So in our instance, you would refer cases to us, we'd feed them into our system, we'd use all the specialist tools that we've built as part of the collections process, and you would get all the benefit of those with very limited requirement from you guys to do that. So those are the state of tools in collections at the moment. And what I really wanted to do was align expectations. So let's say we've got hypothetical, from the outside looking in, non-specialists trying to understand how someone would use AI in collections. And I've purposefully put a bunch of fairly contrived statements around the edge, which would be around getting faster resolution or higher collection rates, automating more, but ultimately what I want to touch upon is the path that we've chosen as a business, and that is to lead AI-driven outcomes with a customer-first approach. Why do we do that? Because our primary objective is to understand a customer's circumstances. We've often found that understanding a customer at a very basic level allows you to give them the best resolution. Once we understand those circumstances, we can provide the right outcomes, basically. It aligns with all the regulatory sort of requirements that are within our industry. So that's why we've gone down that path. And finally, let me look down here, debt rehabilitation and the right outcomes align for both us and our clients. So we want to give the customer the best outcome. You guys want to get the best outcome for your customers. By aligning those visions together, we can utilize AI in an effective means to benefit everybody, basically. So, touching on what Toju said, she had a framework really that she outlined with responsible AI development. And I thought I'd sort of take us down the practical route of what that looks like, basically. So our approach to responsible AI is not simply a case of getting a large language model, firing a load of stuff to it, see how it works, and cracking on. That's the bad way of doing it. We've got a three-step process, really, that we make sure that our models are working effectively before we deploy them. We utilize something called backtesting. We use shadow testing, and then ultimately we lead into A/B testing. So I'll take you through each one individually so you can understand why we do that. So backtesting is a fairly interesting approach to validating your sort of AI or machine learning models. You take what you know are outcomes that have happened, so customer journeys from 12 months ago, 6 months ago, where you've got to a point where you understand how that customer is resolved. You strip away that knowledge, so you make it look like a fresh customer, and then you run it through the AI process. And by doing so, you can see whether it comes to the same resolution or not, which is ultimately a really good way of validating whether your model's doing effectively what you've done for the customer previously. And then shadow testing follows on from that. So we then use shadow testing, and it's basically a method of taking the live data that's coming into the system that hasn't been resolved after you've done your back testing, and you run your standard processes alongside the AI model, which would come to a similar solution, basically. And you monitor those side by side without taking any action, so it doesn't impact the customer, but you're validating the results. And the reason you do that is, again, you can then look for any sort of forward biases. As Toju mentioned, you can have lots of data in the background where you can come to a conclusion, but all it takes is 2 or 3 customers that have very different circumstances than before that go through your model, and then they're classified very differently, and it could be an incorrect sort of outcome for that customer. So we do shadow testing alongside live data to make sure that we're coming up with the right outcomes for the sort of outlier customer journeys that we see there. And then separately, once we're happy with that, we'd move into what's called A/B testing, which I'm sure you're all aware of. It's taking one set of customer data not being put through this process, one set of customer data being put through an AI process, and comparing the outcomes to see which one's most effective. And then separate to that, we've got really high governance around protecting our customer data, because we understand that customer data is probably at the forefront of the concerns around artificial intelligence. In most industries, more so in financial services. So protecting customer data is at the forefront of the decision-making process when building models. We've invested in hundreds of thousands of pounds of vital infrastructure to achieve this. And I think the best way to explain that would be we could utilize a third party like ChatGPT, OpenAI. We could outsource all that data and expose ourselves to that risk. But why would we do that when we can establish internal models that operate on our internal infrastructure that we've got control of? It's our data, it's not going anywhere, it's UK-based. So we've built that sort of framework to manage that process, basically. And then we've ultimately developed a 3-tier approach to exposing the information that we do have on our systems to the wider world. So the first stage of that is really to control the environment. Where possible, we build on those isolated infrastructure environments. So we have on-prem a stack of servers full of GPUs, and I think we're fairly unique in that instance. Making that kind of investment and building that sort of data center infrastructure in your own business is costly, and it's quite rare, but it's given us the flexibility to build fast as opposed to having to consider the risks of sending our data outside of the business and all of the issues that sort of relates to. The second tier is really making sure that any AI model that we develop, we control the data, so we're never giving any more than we need to make a decision. You can have what's called data bleed or data leakage, where you're sort of passing too much information out into these models, and you can form biases, and you can have all the sort of issues and concerns that Toju identified. So we control the data to maintain an unbiased, no data leakage sort of framework there. And then finally, we remove the risk of exposing data to the external world. So where we don't have the computational power on-premise or in our internal systems, and we must use third-party servers because we're not open AI, we're not spending billions on GPUs. We redact personal identifiable information at all costs. We've partnered with a specialist who can guarantee 100% data redaction, basically. So, and we've been happy with that as a service. So in terms of the tools that I'm presenting today, we've got a customer profiler. This is an overarching tool that's got loads of different features around it, but I'm going to focus specifically on the vulnerability assessment and detection. I'll explain why there's more aspects to this later on, but if we look at vulnerability as a sort of the highest risk category of classifying customers' information, that will give you faith that we're doing that correctly. We've got a virtual agent, which in many ways someone might see as a chatbot or large language model. It's not. We've done something very different, so I'll show you that, and it'll be a really interesting approach to how we've built our own sort of AI agent. And then finally, we've got Quality Sentinel, which is a all-encompassing QA tool that can QA and score 100% of customer interactions across the business. Why did we focus on that one? QA as a process is expensive. It's very narrow focused because you're probably only looking at 1% of your customer interactions because of the people that you have to pay to do that. I think we calculated that we'd have to pay around about £6 million in wages to get QA done across the entire business at the same rate that the AI is doing it. And it really gives us that sort of all-encompassing view of how we interact with customers. And the data is invaluable because we can make decisions off the back of that that benefit the customer the most. You know, where one company that's doing standard QA would be making decisions off 1% of a customer's journey, we're holistically looking at all of the customer journeys and making more informed decisions, basically. So just to explain what the customer profiler is, whenever a customer interacts with us or we interact with a customer, we look at the customer state. So customer state could be their current account status, any historic engagement that they had with us, and the latest piece of communication. What we effectively do is feed that into a series of small machine learning models, and they assess the vulnerability of that customer based on all of the information that we've fed in it. The propensity for that customer to engage and by which channel, so we can sort of understand what they prefer and what's the best communication method for that customer. And also the sentiment analysis, so why are they engaging with us, or why are we engaging with them at this point, and is there anything we can do differently? And then with all that information that we've sort of packaged up on that customer journey, we then want to start deciding what the next best action for that customer is. So I'll give you a quick demo of the vulnerability tool that we've got. So we've got 3 customer personas here. I'll probably go through 2 because I don't know what I'm like for time. And separately, we've got a demo station up there so you can get involved yourself. So in this example, we've got Sarah. She's a 30-year-old single mother of 2 children. She works full-time but struggles to cover rent, childcare, and daily expenses. A recent unexpected medical bill pushed her further into debt. So what we'd want to do at that point is, based on all that information that we might have, understand what our vulnerability is. So we pass that through the vulnerability checker. In this instance, it's come back as vulnerable, and we've given it a classification score of 100%. So we can see that that's accurate in that instance. We've got David, who's 45, employed in a stable job, and committing to all of his financial obligations. So we put the same information through our vulnerability checker there. And we can see that David is not vulnerable. So what I'd encourage everyone to do really is, here's a couple of sort of personas. We've got another one here who's highly vulnerable, but equally there's a free text box at the bottom. We've got demo stations up there. Go up there and put any of your potential customer circumstances into that free text box and see how it sort of resolves whether they're vulnerable or not vulnerable. I think the key goal to this is really showing you that we've got a model that works and is identifying vulnerable customers probably about 98% of the time, I think. So, off the demo. Cool. So our virtual agent, probably one of the more interesting projects that we've been working on, where you might query a large language model with a customer's request and get a fairly generalized response back. We've kind of flipped it on its head. We're not using ChatGPT, OpenAI, all these large language models. What we've effectively done is looked at 1.5 million customer emails that we've received historically, and then the agent responses off the back of those where there's been good outcomes. And that's a really powerful data set because we know that a customer's asked the question, we know that we've given an answer, and we know that's a good outcome. So what we effectively do with that is run it into a processing pipeline where we redact, parse, and vectorize. Vectorize is taking the text version of that customer's response and turning it into information that a computer can understand, basically. And then what effectively happens with this is when a new customer email comes in, we can query the 1.5 million customer emails that we've trained our model on in this vector database. We can return the top 5 most relevant responses that that agent has provided to previous customers in similar circumstances with good outcomes. We can pass that into a redaction layer where we take all the personally identifiable information out of it, and then we can send it to ChatGPT as sort of a large payload. So we're sending to ChatGPT the original query, redacted, so no personally identifiable information. What's called few-shot prompting, so the top 5 examples of previous responses that have been successful, and some more sort of guidance criteria around how that customer might interact with us. And at the end of it, we get a formulated response which is bespoke to how our agents would respond to customers, isn't reliant on hallucination because it's not going to a large language model, and has the right responses attached to it so it can learn, basically. Oh, I'll have the demo of that now, actually. Cool. So we've got 3 examples of customers here, and again, stress that we've got this as a demo up there that you can use. Let's say Tim has received communication from us regarding his outstanding balance, and he was unaware, but he wishes to pay in full. So we send that question off to our virtual agent. It's going off in the background to the vector database to pull the top 5 most appropriate responses. It's then redacting all that information, sending it off to ChatGPT, and building a formulated response here. So in terms of the summary it provides, it acknowledges that the customer wants to pay in full, and it gives clear direction on how that customer can deal with it digitally by interacting with our portal, or separately, communicating directly with us by agent. The next example is Jane. Similar example, but she wants to set up a payment arrangement, basically. So that will go off again to our vector database and get the top 5 responses before being fed into a response. And again, it's acknowledged the customer's will to address the balance, acknowledges that the payment in full is not feasible, and then suggests that setting up a 6-month plan in the portal is probably the best route, but ultimately contact us if needed. So they're fairly simple examples that I'm giving, but again, free text box at the top. You can use the demo, you can see how it works. But what you can see with this is what we're trying to achieve is most of our customers want to deal with us digitally. They want a simple response that gives them guidance on how they can do that. So to Phil's stats, 80% of our customers would interact with us in this way digitally. And by having this system in place, we're not using the agents to do this menial work. What we can effectively do, combined with a vulnerability detection system and this, is when a vulnerable customer gets in touch with us, not use this. We can get an agent to communicate with them directly because we acknowledge that agents will always have specialist experience in dealing with vulnerable customers. The chatbot probably won't. So it's really serving up the path of least resistance for people who want digital support, but then also freeing up our agents to have the really meaningful conversations with customers in vulnerable situations. Cool. And then the final demo is Quality Sentinel. So this is the QA tool that I spoke about. So this is taking customer interaction from customers that have been dealing with us in the contact center. That can be telephone, email, SMS, or live chat. We download that, we transcribe it, we redact any personally identifiable information, and then we use a popular large language model to ask a series of questions against that transcript to determine whether the questions have been validated successfully or not. And what this effectively does is automate our QA process and let us QA 100% of our customer interactions, but not for the sake of reducing workloads. It's to free up our quality assurance team to then have a holistic view and focus on the very small sort of customers in real difficulty that could potentially see bad outcomes and give them the right guidance and support to get to the point where we're not giving customers bad outcomes, basically. So we can go to the demo on that, if that's okay. So I've got a call here. It's a hypothetical call, albeit we've put a few errors in there, so it should pick on those. I don't know if you want to... Are you playing? I don't think we've got audio on the...
Yeah, it's
there we go.
TEFT.
So Billy's going to hit transcribe, and that's going to send the call off to our internal transcription and redaction process.
002. Thank you.
It should take around 14 seconds, so it should give you an indication of the pace.
Yeah, it's Danny Dawson.
And I'll probably just let you assess the accuracy of this.
It's second floor Gmail. It's HX35AX.
Thank you. And your date of birth, please.
The 1st of the 1st, 2000.
Cool. Can you pause that?
Perfect.
Thank you. So we just hit score on that. And this will then start the scoring process, which is taking that redacted transcript, asking a series of scorecard-based questions against the transcript and understanding whether the customer was dealt with in an appropriate manner or not. This takes roughly 20 seconds. So end-to-end, the process to transcribe, redact, and score a call within our systems, round about 40 seconds. So it scored this 82.5% on the scorecard that we've provided today, and you can identify the positive responses with the ticks, the negative responses with the X's, but then equally what we do is follow up with some guidance on how the agent could have handled that portion of the call better. The bigger picture with this is then, if we're doing 100% of QAs through the day, we can amalgamate all of this sort of positive and negative feedback into a feedback email that goes to the agent. So when the agent comes in the next day, they've been given guidance on, you could probably use your name better, you could probably introduce yourself using the company name, to more sort of robust things like, did you ask the correct questions around a customer's affordability? Cool. So I don't know what's next, actually. Okay, yeah, so what's the big picture? So we've talked about these three tools today, and they're all fairly individual tools that can be used throughout the process. But what we effectively want to achieve, or what I strive to achieve, is really a sort of next best action loop that audits itself. Reason being, we can allow AI to make a decision on what the best choice is, but then we can also use our AI tools to assess whether that was the right choice and learn from that over time. So it's sort of like a feedback system. So in the instance of in 12 months' time, what do I see? I'd like to think that we'd have a customer referred to us. We'd pass them through the customer profiler that we've got. We'd determine whether there's a risk or no risk. If there is a risk, we'd use our specialist customer support teams because they're best trained to deal with those types of customers. If there's no risk, we'd feed them into the sort of standard process where they'd have communication. If from that communication there's an interaction, it's either engagement and they want to talk to us, or they've resolved their issue. So that's what we'd like to achieve. If they engage, again, we would pass that engagement through the customer profiler, and again use that logic to understand whether there's risk or no risk. If there's risk, they'd go to the customer support specialist. If there's no risk, we would virtually direct them to the right process to get resolution, basically. So you can sort of see all of these tools that individually are quite powerful, but when put together holistically, they can form a really powerful customer journey that's relatively automated, but ultimately ensures that the specialist customer support teams that we've got in place are dealing with the right customers first. And that will ultimately lead to the original statement that we put up at the start, really, to lead AI-driven outcomes with a customer-first approach. And that is my talk. Cool.
And while we're bringing the audience questions up, just one that we have a discussion about quite a lot back at the office. It's so AI is perceived kind of the how rather than the how rather than the what. And it needs to be that you have a problem first, i.e. a problem that you need to answer X amount of customer calls, or you need to make sure that your agents are doing correctly what they need to be doing on these calls or emails or web chats. How do you come up with that bigger picture stuff before you start using AI as a vehicle to then answer that? And so is there any instances where perhaps AI isn't the right
so I think that's it sort of harks back to what Toji was saying, really. Is there going to be an all-encompassing AI system that does everything for you? Absolutely not. There may be in the future, but that future is far and far ahead. What we can deal with at this point in time is very specific sort of issues within businesses and within the world, and we can build very specific tools that can deal with those problems. But when you've got an assortment of these tools, you can put them all together and really start to flesh out this sort of customer journey. So I think ultimately the only way we are going to move forwards is have this sort of small tool. Here's a problem. We need to solve that problem approach because the holistic AI systems are being built by your OpenAIs and your other big businesses like that. They're striving for something entirely different to what we're striving for. They want a artificial general intelligence.
And Anonymous is providing us with some pretty good questions today, so whoever that is out there can... But this follows on quite nicely. When will it be possible to substitute today's collection software by Gen AI generated software? It kind of touches on what you were just saying there.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I think it's a very difficult one to ask because in our industry, or as humans generally, would you ever want to replace every single interaction with a person in the world with a robot? Probably not. So do we think that's ever going to happen? No. What it's effectively doing is providing this path of least resistance approach, really, where I do want to engage digitally, I can, and I don't need to speak to people. But where I really need to speak to people, I can get the option a lot quicker because there's those tool sort of services that are working in tandem together.
Kind of filtering things out to the humans correctly. I'll pick up on this one on the bottom. We've got a bit of time, so we'll get through a few more than we did in the first session. But it's, how does this compare to Maestro QA's, in brackets, any other offering in the market?
I think that's a good question. And I suppose to a certain extent, I can sit here with a financial services collection-specific mindset to this. We've built these tools bespokely with the information that we've got access to, and they're specifically catered to support and help within a very specific finance, fintech, collections, vulnerable customers, financial support process. What you might find with tools on the market is they're more generalist around customer support or automation or all those sort of other elements. So the reason we sort of tasked ourselves with building our own quality assurance platform was that we wanted to identify vulnerable customers that were maybe having outcomes that weren't ideal, and we wanted to improve that. So that's why we built our system, and that's why it would differ.
Yeah, another pokey one from Anonymous here. All of your customers are defaulted. Therefore, they could be classed as financial unresilient and therefore vulnerable. What does the assessment tool add to our processes?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think if you were to look at a top level, metric, let's say a credit score, you might come to that conclusion that all your customers have got poor credit scores. But we're not building that. We're building specific tools to identify based on language that customers are using, based on how they've interacted with us, based on how they may not have interacted with us, to understand their circumstances. And that's very different to coming up with a generalist view that all of our customers are defaulted.
Ken has just popped up. Tech appears to transcribe voice to text and then use AI to identify vulnerability. And there was another one that was previous, like to a free slide. And we'll get to the selling bit. I know selling keeps coming up. Pete's itching to go around speaking to you, so you can speak to Pete after. What is on the roadmap? Because we're building all these databases for customer contacts. We've got hundreds of thousands of emails. We've got millions of chats. We've got hundreds of thousands of telephone calls. What does that, from an ecosystem perspective, these are very specific use cases that you've produced, but where do you think that will end up in short, medium, long term?
That's a really good question. And I suppose you can only build to what the industry is working towards. AI is obviously an emerging technology and it's advancing at a very fast pace. So what you build in 6 months' time might be redundant in 12, if that makes sense. So you really have to balance what's effective now versus what you think might be achievable in 12 to 24 months. So you can't 100% sort of guess where we're going. There's so many emerging technologies that will have a massive impact. I know it's 5 years down the line, but if we look at quantum computing as an example, what sort of impact is that going to have on processing power, specifically around sort of large language models? We don't know. So all we do know is that we can build tools and systems that will support our customers for the next 6 to 12 months, with the outlook as an industry that everyone's moving towards sort of agent-driven workflows. And if we work towards that as a whole, then everyone's pushing in the right direction, I think.
Kind of links into this one. So is that what's on the agenda for the next 12 months?
Yeah, it's tech, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Agent tech.
Yeah.
Anyone want to have a go on the microphone? Don't all shout at once, no? Okay. One more question. Our coeo selling. How about the second one from Damien? The answer to the first one is yes, actually. So Pete, Rich, Carl, Phil, anyone who you need to speak, Josh, put his hand up there. Anyone you want to talk to about any of the tech, Steve as well, feel free to do so. Account/resolution agent to manage allocated accounts. I'm guessing this is like splitting up and sending out. How would you recommend AI to use to complement this strategy? So segmentation, I think. Damien, is it about segmentation?
No, so we actually allocate to the agent straight away. We don't use an automated hour system. We believe in dedicated
Okay.
account management.
Yeah.
We only work in the commercial space. So we believe in giving someone a dedicated debt split.
I see.
Work with it personally, other things like the empathy that goes into that and building and all that one-on-one conversation with the customer. How would AI complement that? We want to take away the personal touch, which is something earlier speaker said about the soul and so on. So how would you recommend?
So almost like call routing, account routing. Yeah.
That's great, but how would you get AI to increase productivity and not take away that personal touch?
I'm trying to fully understand the question, to be honest.
So it's like an account routing system.
Yeah.
So Stephen, you're very good at high value commercial accounts. Therefore, we want the account to go to you in a smaller operation.
I suppose,
be able to divert.
I suppose, and I wouldn't question your business model or how you sort of manage that process, but you have built an account distribution service based on previous history and a series of assumptions on how people might handle certain debts. That's not always given. That can change. And what I would effectively suggest you do is maybe do a lot of back testing using AI to understand whether other agencies that are maybe within your portfolio, other agencies, how they might handle that debt now if they've changed their processes. I think that's where I'd start. I'd start by analysing whether that model is working as effectively as it can, and I think you can use AI to sort of get to a stage where AI could tell you whether that's the case or not.
Perfect. One more before Mr. Parry walks up and does his session. Kind of touching on the earlier diagram that you had up about A/B testing, etc., etc. Once it's gone live, how do we then, or you assess success?
So I think the best example of that is our Quality Sentinel. We've not put Quality Sentinel live and said we don't need a QA team anymore. We've put Quality Sentinel live because the QA team can use all of that valuable information to work with it and see how we are actually sort of dealing with customers. It's not a case that it is replacing anyone. it's adding value and in giving people information. So what a QA team would do traditionally, listen to calls, score them, has shifted to auditing the calls to make sure the agent's scoring them correctly and sort of coming up with better ideas on how it could do it, or identifying bias as far as Toju would say, or anything like that. So yeah, it's not a case of replacing, it's a case of accenting how people do their jobs basically.
Cool.
Cool.
Sorry, I was just trying to get the next slide up. Do you want to answer one more?
Yeah, I can do, but I will be up there. I will be able to answer questions, and I will be able to show you the demos, so I'm not going anywhere.
Cheers, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Well done, mate.